I'm Madison, a 45-year-old divorcee who had sworn off marriage for good. The reason I was fed up with marriage was because I was exploited as a caregiver by my former in-laws during my previous marriage. After my first marriage, I obtained a certification as a home helper, now known as a certified nursing assistant. I was very close to my grandmother and wanted to take proper care of her when she became bedridden, which is why I pursued the certification. However, upon learning this, my then-husband's parents told me right after my grandmother's funeral. "Now it's your turn to take care of our grandparents." They said this while I was still in tears from losing my grandmother. I was appalled by their insensitivity, but indeed, from the very next day, I was burdened with taking care of my former husband's grandparents all by myself. Despite appealing to my ex-husband, he did nothing to help, saying, "You're the wife, so it's only natural," and didn't even try to mediate with his parents. I endured this for about 2 years but finally couldn't take it anymore and managed to divorce him with the help of a lawyer. That's why, after the divorce, I never dated men who had living grandparents or parents, and I turned down all matchmaking proposals. Having acquired multiple certifications in caregiving, I was confident that I could get a job in a nursing home and support myself if needed. It was Tom, a colleague of mine, who approached me. We worked in the same department, so we had many opportunities to talk, and I gradually became attracted to Tom's bright and refreshing personality. However, unfortunately, he had parents to care for, so when he asked me out, I explained my situation with my divorce and turned him down. But Tom kept saying, "I will never let you go through the hardship of caregiving," and trusting his words, I accepted his proposal at the age of 40. Life with Tom was smooth sailing at first. He was a top-performing sales employee, and even if I quit my job as he wished, we had enough savings to live comfortably. Though we were at an age where having children was not an option, we thought we could enjoy our retirement just the two of us. But our dream shattered when Tom was forced to resign due to office politics. It was a huge shock for him, and he lost his motivation to work. With him shutting himself in his room all day, I decided to re-enter the workforce. However, finding a full-time job for a housewife over 40 with a gap in her resume was difficult. Even if I found one, the pay was at best around $1,500 a month in this area. While I was contemplating what to do, I saw a job posting for a caregiving facility. I knew that caregiving jobs were hard, but some places offered between $2,000 to $2,500, depending on the location and position. Thinking I would persevere until Tom could work again, I decided to take the job at the caregiving facility. The work was more challenging than I had imagined. I had to keep an eye on dozens of residents, assist them with eating, changing, bathing, toileting, and come up with recreational activities. I felt like I was running around all day, and I lost 11 pounds in a month, often experiencing fainting spells due to anemia. Naturally, I had no energy left to take care of Tom after returning home. I would almost always collapse upon getting home, and eventually, he began to complain, saying, "Madison, you smell." Dealing with the residents' excrement was a daily task. Since food often got spit out due to swallowing difficulties, the smell inevitably clung to me. After being pointed out by my husband, I tried to take a shower immediately after coming home, doing my best to prevent his mood from worsening further. But one day, Tom said, "Can't you find a better job?" and I was infuriated. Day in and day out, I take care of the elderly, have night shifts, and all for a mere take-home pay of just over $2,000. It's ridiculous. I used to earn twice that without night shifts or weekends. And, lately you've had a strong smell of aging. Is it the smell of old people? Or is it you? How could he say such things when I was working hard to support him? I take pride in my work. I was also furious that he belittled my profession as a caregiver. Then go ahead and earn twice as much. If you do, I'll quit my job right now, I snapped back, making him turn red with anger. How can you be so cold? I'm suffering here, and you're telling me to work. From then on, our exchanges became a series of tit-for-tat, and we hardly spoke to each other afterwards. However, I wanted to avoid divorce at all costs. Being from a small town, my divorce had already become the talk of the town in a not-so-flattering way. If I became a two-time divorcee, I could only imagine what would be said. I didn't want to cause my parents any more distress than I already had. Tom felt the same. Having been pushed out of his job on top of being a divorcee, he was seen as an unfortunate man by those around us. And if he became a two-time divorcee on top of that, Since we both had our interests in mind, we came to an unspoken agreement to somewhat reconcile. And Tom decided to start working part-time at a delivery warehouse nearby, just 2 days a week. He complained non-stop about not being suited for physical labor but reluctantly agreed when I asked him to at least earn his own spending money. During this time, a celebration for my father-in-law's 77th birthday was planned. I heard that Tom's sister always took charge of family gatherings, so I contacted her to say I wouldn't be attending. I would be returning home around 9 a.m. after a night shift, and the celebration was starting at 11 a.m., leaving no time for sleep. I thought it would be a nuisance if I attended in such a state. When she said to me, "Don't you realize you're the eldest son's wife?" So I asked, what does that have to do with anything? It's highly relevant. Your in-laws, especially being the wife of the heir, should be your top priority. Skipping it just because you're up all night? That's outrageous, she yelled at me. I explained that the caregiving facility was short-staffed and there was no one to cover for me, but she completely ignored that. She even went as far as to say, just like my brother said. You're the type to kick him while he's down. Making him work and do physical labor without a second thought. Insensitive people don't care about family. And to think, you work with old, smelly, and dirty people. Only someone as thick-skinned and insensitive as you could handle that kind of job. She hung up on me before I could retort in anger. On the day of the celebration, Tom dragged me along, and I attended in a half-asleep state. Immediately, his sister blurted out, "Wow, just like my brother said, Madison really does stink," waking me up. To accuse someone like that at a celebration was utterly disrespectful. And Tom added, "Doesn't she? I can't tell if it's her or the residents from the facility, but the smell doesn't even go away with a bath anymore." Yeah, that's the worst. They were cheerfully chatting about such an awful topic. Feeling disgusted, my mother-in-law said, "Well, she's going to be taking care of us someday, so let's not say anything too harsh." Then my sister-in-law said, "Oh, right, she's a professional. With Madison here, we're set for our old age," to which the in-laws agreed. Infuriated, I asked, "Why is that?" "Huh? Because you're the eldest son's wife and a caregiving pro, so it's already decided," she laughed. "That's not decided at all. Besides, a daughter-in-law is not obligated to take care of her in-laws," I replied with a smile. Seeing their puzzled faces, I explained, "It's determined by Article 877 of the Civil Code. Only direct blood relatives and siblings, meaning people who are blood related to the in-laws, have the duty to support each other. And if someone who is obligated to provide care neglects this duty, they can be held accountable," I added, causing a stir among everyone present. However, this duty mentioned in the law refers to financial support. So, providing for living expenses or paying for nursing home fees suffices. If that's not possible, then daily care is also acceptable, I elaborated carefully. Having been forced to care for my former in-laws in my previous marriage, I thoroughly researched caregiving qualifications and laws after my divorce. Tom then blanched, saying, "I don't have any money." Then, as a duty of a biological child, why don't you take care of them daily or ask your sister for financial support? His sister then panicked, "No way, that's a joke. I mean, I have to take care of my husband's parents." "So, you have no obligation to take care of your husband's parents. Please explain that to them and ask them to take care of their own parents," I said with a smile. That's when my in-laws, who had been quiet, chimed in. "Madison, you're a professional caregiver, right? Taking care of us should be easy for you." "Yeah, it's only proper for you to take care of us rather than strangers' parents." I was infuriated by their words. "I work full-time. It's impossible." Then, my mother-in-law suggested nonchalantly that I should just quit my job at the facility. "And what about mine and Tom's living expenses? Are you saying you'll cover those?" When I mentioned that I earn about $2,200 at the facility and that they would have to compensate me that amount if I quit, they both fell silent, exchanging glances. However, Tom and his sister were far from convinced. "Do you think that kind of reasoning will work? Being married to the eldest son, it's only natural for you to take care of his parents," they argued. As if theirs wasn't the flawed logic. Worse yet, Tom denied ever promising not to burden me with caregiving duties before we got married. That's when my anger exploded. You know very well how hard caregiving is, having seen me work every day. It's physically demanding, it stinks, and it's stressful. You and your sister laughed at me, calling elderly care dirty and smelly. You expect me to do all that for free while neither of you lift a finger. I yelled at the top of my lungs, my voice echoing through the room. At that, both of them looked down, their faces showing guilt. But after a while, Tom shamelessly suggested that when his parents needed care, I should get them into the facility I work at for a cheap price. That's impossible. Besides, our place is a special nursing home with a long wait list. There's almost no chance of getting in. I coldly dismissed the idea. So, if your parents ever need caregiving, I'll be counting on Tom, his sister, and her children to take the lead, thank you very much. I said before leaving the dinner early and going home. I went straight to the city hall to pick up divorce papers, signed them upon returning home, left them on the living room table. Took only a few personal items, and left the house. Afterward, the dinner party reportedly turned chaotic. Even though Tom's parents didn't yet need care, he and his sister started arguing over who should take responsibility. The father blamed the mother for their children's poor upbringing, and the mother accused Tom of choosing the wrong wife. Even Tom's sister's husband, her daughter, and other relatives got involved, causing a huge uproar. After a bit of turmoil, the divorce was finalized, and Tom, unable to support himself, reluctantly moved back in with his parents. Trying to escape caregiving duties, he registered on a dating site exclusive to nurses, desperately reaching out to anyone. At over 40 and only working a part-time job twice a week, he truly is a hopeless case. I became a 2-time divorcee, but I have no regrets. It happened just when my father received a Care Level 2 certification, so I decided to return home and help my mother take care of him. At the New Year's Eve party held at my in-laws, my sister-in-law Jessica and I were each tasked with bringing our own dishes. While out shopping near my in-laws, I came across Brian and Jessica walking arm in arm. Unaware of my presence, Brian and Jessica were chatting away merrily. Serious Eugene would never imagine Brian and I are having an affair. It's the thrill of sneaking around that's just so exciting. When can you stay over next? Come over tomorrow. With a burst of vulgar laughter, Brian and Jessica disappeared into the crowd. Back at the in-laws, Jessica and I were busy in the kitchen and the living room. Brian, who arrived late, immediately turned pale after sampling the food. He snatched the box from my hands and dumped everything into the outside trash bin. Don't serve lousy food to the relatives. I retorted to Brian's yelling. I didn't make any of it, you know? What? I smirked inwardly. Now, how shall I expose them in front of the family? I'm Hope, a 50-year-old housewife. 25 years ago, I married Brian after being introduced by an acquaintance. The following year, we had our son Alex. Brian is a sales manager at a large corporation, earning well above the average salary. Brian's parents have always treated me like their own daughter, making me immune to mother-in-law conflicts. Alex graduated from a well-known university and got a job at a multinational company. He started living on his own when he got the job and visits us on long weekends. To outsiders, our marriage might seem perfectly happy. But in reality, it was suffocating under Brian's domineering presence, with Alex and I always wary of his mood. Before we got married, Brian readily agreed when I said I wanted to keep working. Moreover, he even volunteered to share the household chores. We can live on my salary alone, but I want to start saving for education expenses early. It would really help if Hope could work. Since I'll be home late on weekdays, I can take care of weekend chores. However, once we were married, the situation completely reversed. Whether he came home on time or worked late, Brian would spend his evenings lying on the sofa, playing with his phone. Far from helping with the chores, he wouldn't even bother to take his used cup to the sink. And on weekends, it was more of the same, either on his phone or computer or laughing uproariously in front of the TV. Since my job required me to work on either Saturday or Sunday, I would leave young Alex in Brian's care on my days off, with his agreement. Of course. Despite this arrangement, Brian complained every time. One day, fed up, I voiced my complaints, and Brian yelled at me. You're like a demon. Dumping the kid on me and demanding housework on my only days off. All I asked was for you to bring in the laundry if it rained. And aren't you Alex's father? I said, nearly in tears, but it seemed to have no effect on Brian. He scowled as if I were a nuisance. Childcare is the mother's job. Every family does it, so stop your whining. You should be grateful and show respect that the head of the household is even helping with child rearing. When he was tired and in a bad mood, he would make me sit and list every fault in my housekeeping. Can't you cook anything better? Don't use the kid as an excuse. A housewife who can't cook decent meals is a failure. Don't skimp on meals. Besides the main dish, prepare at least 3 other dishes. Every household does it, why can't you? You're a disgrace as a housewife. You'd probably mess up the finances, so I'll manage them. Hand over your earnings for savings. $100 a month should be enough for your allowance. Eventually, when Alex ran up to him, Brian would visibly grimace and escape to his study. Daddy. I'm busy. Go play with mommy. He'd shoo Alex towards me, busy with meal preparations. Even when I leave Alex with Brian on weekday evenings, he might help with meals and changing clothes, but he just sets Alex up with children's videos or TV. Never really engaging with him. Just play with him a little. I've been working until just now. Unlike a housewife who has all the time in the world, I'm busy. Let me rest at home. Do I look idle to you? Maybe you should get your eyes checked. At that, Brian's face would turn red with anger, and he'd shout at me furiously. Since when did you become so bold to talk back to me? This is my house. If you have complaints, leave. Take him and go, right now. Knowing I had nowhere else to go, Brian's words were especially painful. The thought of divorce crossed my mind, but that would require money, which Brian controlled. Even if I wanted to save secretly, it was impossible on a part-time salary. I went too far. I'm sorry, I said eventually. As long as you understand. When you earn more than me, then I'll listen to what you have to say. My affection for Brian had long since faded, but the thought of taking Alex away from his father also made me pause. Above all, Brian's parents are wonderful people, and Alex adores his grandparents. In front of his parents, Brian was always kind to us. He played the role of a good father in front of others. When we were dating, Brian was incredibly kind. He never bragged about his knowledge or looked down on others. He seemed like a genuinely nice person. However, not long after we got married, Brian began to belittle me for my education. You probably don't know this, he'd say. You can do this kind of calculation easily, right? Why don't you understand? With your education, maybe this topic is too much for you? At first, he'd mock me gently, with a half-smile. But as Alex grew older, Brian began to insist on an elite path for him. If he's my son, he should be able to get into the top public high school in the county. It's free and close by. We'll save on educational costs. It's convenient to have a school nearby. But maybe he'll find a school he likes better when he gets to middle school. I won't allow anywhere but there. It's a waste of money on tuition fees. I was astounded. Is this the attitude of someone with a high income? Shall we get a tutor then? Or send him to a cram school? Neither is necessary. Just by attending classes, getting 100% is easy. I couldn't believe my ears. If you're worried, you can teach him. You're home by the evening, so you have time. I've forgotten middle school studies. The methods are different now. And when I get home, I'm swamped with housework, it's impossible. I was irked by the insinuation that I had free time. Even with an older child, there's plenty of work beyond housework, like overseeing homework and checking the next day's school requirements. Then Brian smirked. Teaching must be beyond someone like you. It's unfortunate for Alex to have a mother with such limitations. His continued provocations were stunning. By the way, since you promised to manage the household, when are you going to quit your job? What? The house has been a mess lately, I can't relax at home. Why don't you quit your job and focus on Alex's education? Prioritize your family over making pocket money. I stared at him, aghast. The mess was his doing. After coming home from work, he'd leave shirts and socks scattered around the living room. Dirty dishes remained on the table. Books taken from the study were left on the dining table and sofa, forgotten. It's not about pocket money, I'm saving for Alex's college and our retirement. We discussed this when I restarted work. I swallowed the words, "You're the one making the mess," and just stated the fact, to which Brian sneered. "Don't get ahead of yourself thinking the company needs you. Unlike me, you're just a disposable part-timer." "Right," I conceded. "Anyway, make sure he goes to the same university as me." "I won't accept anything less," Brian declared in a frustrating manner. I was irritated by his tone but refrained from arguing. Arguing back would only risk him being stingy about the college fund. Later, when Alex managed to get into a selective school on his own, Brian started bragging as if it was his own achievement. "Yes, it's a school that sends students to prestigious universities every year. Being my son, he's naturally smart." Without saying congratulations, or "you worked hard" to Alex, Brian just boasted to everyone with a smile, leaving me feeling disgusted. One day, I'll divorce this man. Yet, fears about finances and living arrangements kept me from taking any action as time passed. Eventually, after graduating from university, Alex started his career and began living on his own. Lately, my conversations with Brian have significantly diminished. This is because his weekend work and overtime suddenly increased about half a year ago. Our household finances are managed by Brian. I don't mind if he increases his allowance with the extra earnings. However, recently, a large sum was withdrawn from my credit card without my knowledge. Upon investigation, I discovered a high-brand bag had been purchased at some point. When I asked Brian, he responded with a scowl. "My card was maxed out, so I borrowed yours. We're family, so it shouldn't be a problem, right?" "It shouldn't be a problem. It's a $2,000 brand bag." "Who did you give it to?" "It was a birthday present for my niece." I felt suspicious. Brian's brother, Eugene, has a daughter with his ex-wife. Brian has always doted on her since she was little. But would he really give such an expensive gift to a college student? Brian started coming home wearing perfume, and when I pressed him, he mentioned his niece again. I went out to eat with her. She's been busy with her part-time job and couldn't visit grandma over the holidays, so I wanted to treat her. She seemed lonely with my brother being overseas. Something felt off, but since I wasn't close to the niece, I hesitated to ask her directly. With these unresolved feelings, the seasons changed to winter. Eventually, after Christmas, Brian received a call from his mother. "What, you hurt your back?" Brian pressed the speakerphone button so I could hear the conversation. "It's just a little twist. Dad's here, and it's nothing serious, so don't worry. But it seems I won't be able to stand in the kitchen for the holidays. Should we just order food from a restaurant?" Hearing his mother's concern, Brian quickly suggested. "Don't worry. I'll have Hope make it." "What?" I thought, annoyed by his casual statement. After all, the extended family gathers at the in-laws for the holiday celebration. There will be food for 20 people. It's a lot of work for so many people. It's one thing if you and I work on it together like usual. Then Jessica and Hope can make it and bring it over. 10 portions each should be easy. Jessica is Eugene's wife. Eugene remarried a woman a decade younger this spring, but he won't be back until after the holidays due to overseas work commitments. I glared at Brian's back as he made the suggestion so lightly. I don't want to hear it from someone who can't even make a simple meal. "Hope, Brian says this, but can I ask you to do it?" "Well, yes. It's fine. Thank you so much for the trouble. I really appreciate it. Just take your time and rest, Mom." Brian, all smiles as he ended the call, then turned to me. "Hey. Don't be a burden to Jessica, understand?" Despite him not lifting a finger to help, he had the nerve to act superior. I was inwardly furious but asked without showing my irritation. "You're going to help with the holiday preparations too, right? You're off work, and you don't have any plans." Brian suddenly became evasive. "Well, actually, I have to work on a holiday." "Again? Hasn't it been happening a lot lately?" "The company is officially off, but there was a mistake made by one of my subordinates in a deal. I have to apologize to the client. It's always me who has to clean up these messes, it's troubling." Brian laughed it off, scratching his head. Not being familiar with the workings of a large company from my experience in a small office job, I tilted my head, wondering if that's just how it is. However, when I mentioned this to Alex, he looked puzzled. Going to the office with a subordinate when work officially ends on the 28th? That's strange. That does seem odd. But the thought of starting a fight during the busy end of the year was too much hassle, so I decided not to delve further into it. Finally, New Year's Eve arrived. As promised to my mother-in-law, I prepared the holiday dishes and headed to the in-laws. I busied myself helping my father-in-law prepare for the arrival of many relatives, setting up large tables and cushions in the living room, and laying out tableware for 20 people. I was wondering when Jessica would arrive when a message came through on the family group chat. Hope, Jessica will be a bit late. Understood. Oh, we've run out of whiskey. Shall I go buy some? Could you? That would be great. We have wine and beer, so take your time. All right, I'll be off then. After greeting the relatives who had started to gather, I left my in-laws' house. There's a discount liquor store in the nearby bustling downtown area, so I decided to walk there instead of driving. As I walked through the crowded arcade, a familiar scent of perfume wafted towards me. Looking up, I saw Brian walking towards me, arm in arm with a woman, chatting and laughing. Completely engrossed in their conversation, Brian, wearing his hat low, didn't notice me at all. I stole a glance at the woman's face and was shocked. It was Jessica, of all people. Hope is such an idiot, coming from a lower-ranked university. It's so frustrating. Brian complained with a disgusted look. His loud voice echoed through the busy street. But Alex did so well, graduating from such prestigious high school and university. That's amazing. He really worked hard. Jessica responded in a cooing voice. He's my son, after all. It's natural. But it's embarrassing having such an uneducated wife. She doesn't know how to support her husband. And with no parents, her upbringing is poor too. I was furious. I couldn't stand being looked down upon by someone who always belittles others. So, Brian, why did you marry her then? I thought she'd be the type to obediently follow me. I wanted to outdo my brother since he only has one daughter, to produce an heir and show him. For such a reason. I was dumbfounded. Brian, your rivalry with Eugene is so obvious. Jessica giggled as they walked past me. I had stopped in my tracks without realizing it and stood to the side of the walkway, eavesdropping on their conversation so as not to block the passers-by. Jessica and Brian stopped on the other side of a vending machine, continuing their conversation while buying drinks. Eugene, being so serious, would never imagine Brian and I are having an affair. The thrill of sneaking around is just irresistible. When can you stay over next? Come over tomorrow. I'll be there. My wife believes anything if I say it's work-related. It's convenient she's so naive. Brian chuckled crudely, and they disappeared into the crowd. I trembled with rage. My suspicions were confirmed, they were indeed having an affair. And with his brother's wife, no less. They must have been mocking Eugene and me all along. Unforgivable. Just wait and see. I'll give them the most unforgettable holiday evening. Before returning to my in-laws, I had a stop to make, so I informed my mother-in-law and took a detour. When I arrived at my in-laws, Jessica was already there, preparing drinks and snacks in the kitchen with Brian's cousins and their children. Where's Brian? He's not here yet. Should be arriving soon, I guess? Right. It would be odd for them to arrive together, so they must have planned to visit separately. All the relatives had already arrived. The older men seated at the large table were flushed from drinking, loudly chatting and watching TV. I approached Jessica with a proposal. The thing is, that's fine with me. It might have been a mistake, but this could be a good chance to showcase my cooking to everyone. Can I transfer it into this decorative box? It's a shame to present such lovely dishes in plain containers. Yay! Thank you so much. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law, who had injured her back, was serving drinks to the relatives in the living room. After a while, Brian finally arrived. He was in a suit, carrying a laptop case. Work caught up with me even at the end of the year. Hard work being a salaried man, huh? After washing his hands, Brian joined the circle of relatives and started drinking. Hope, thank you. Could we start bringing out the food? Let's all eat together. My mother-in-law opened the door to the living room and called out to the kitchen. All right, coming. I prepared small plates and forks for the food, waiting for Brian's cousins and Jessica to return to the kitchen. Jessica was chatting with the relatives while carrying snacks. With food for 20 people, it needed to be carried in several trips. As I was deciding which decorative box to carry first, decorated with elegant patterns, Brian suddenly appeared. "Oh, Brian, you're helping too? With this much, it's going to be tough to carry everything." Brian, already flushed from drinking, didn't respond but opened the lid of a decorative box. Using his fork, he started picking at the dishes. "Hey, that's rude." Brian exaggeratedly grimaced, then inexplicably opened the back door, took the decorative box outside. "What's going on?" Peering through the back door, I was speechless. Brian was dumping the contents of the decorative box into the trash can. As Brian made several trips between the trash can and the kitchen, he finally tossed the empty decorative box into the kitchen sink and yelled at me. "Don't serve lousy food to the relatives." My eyes blinked in disbelief. "I didn't make any of it," I retorted. "What?" "It was all made by Jessica." Brian looked dumbfounded for a moment but quickly turned on me. "Don't lie. That's our decorative box. I know you made it." "Well, what was that taste? Even pig slop is better. If you serve such terrible food, it's me and Mom who are embarrassed. You can't even make proper holiday dishes? What kind of wife, no, what kind of woman are you?" Brian ranted furiously, but I calmly informed him. "Your taste in food is seriously questionable. Jessica's dishes were delicious. Haven't you ever eaten her cooking?" "Well, we always eat out. Jessica didn't bring her own containers, so she used what was available. That's why I lent her ours." Brian's eyes widened. "She was supposed to make half, but she accidentally prepared enough for 20. So, I gave her portion to Alex, told him to enjoy it with his friends." I explained carefully. "Jessica wanted to show off her cooking skills to everyone, so I thought it was a good opportunity. You should have told me sooner." I smirked inwardly. Knowing Brian, who always criticizes my cooking, I anticipated he would complain if I switched the contents of the containers with Jessica's. I never imagined he'd throw it in the trash, though. Now, how shall I expose them in front of the relatives? This is going to be an interesting evening. Just then, Jessica arrived at the entrance, and I raised my voice. "Can you believe it? Brian threw away all the dishes that Jessica made." The bottle of drink Jessica was holding dropped to the floor. Turning around at the sound, Brian's eyes widened as he saw Jessica's shocked expression. "Brian, what do you mean by that?" "Jessica." Well." Brian fumbled for words. Tears started rolling down Jessica's cheeks. I ordered the ingredients directly from the producers, researched recipes, and spent an entire day making it. I was so excited to make delicious dishes for everyone to enjoy. "And you threw it all away?" Jessica's tearful plea made Brian scramble for an excuse. "Sorry, I made a mistake. You know, I'm drunk. Don't use being drunk as an excuse. Didn't your parents teach you not to waste food when you were a child?" Years of frustration exploded, and I snapped at Brian. "You always act so superior to me and Alex, but when you're drunk, your true colors show." Brian started to speak but held back his complaints in front of Jessica. Probably because making a scene near the doorway to the room would carry the noise into the living room. But it was in vain. "Sorry for serving dishes worse than pig slop. I'm just a failure as a woman, right?" Jessica, sitting on the floor, burst into tears, and the relatives gathered around. "What happened? What's going on?" As I explained, my in-laws were appalled. My mother-in-law looked pityingly at the sobbing Jessica and sighed. "I must have raised him wrong. I'm so sorry." My mother-in-law apologized to Jessica. The other relatives defended her and verbally attacked Brian in unison. "Brian is 50, right? It's his responsibility. Brian, you need to take responsibility. You're not saying we have to celebrate the evening without dishes, are you?" I stepped forward and appealed pitifully in front of Brian. "I'm sorry. This happened because I switched the contents of the containers. Brian is actually very kind. Let me show you the proof right now." I took out my phone and pressed the play button on a recording. Brian was startled by the audio that played. Hope is such an idiot, coming from a lower-ranked university. It's so annoying. It was the conversation between Brian and Jessica that I had recorded earlier in the downtown area when I spotted them. Although there was background noise, their voices were clearly audible. Stop it. I mean, please stop. I'm begging you. Brian glared at me threateningly, but I ignored him and continued to play the audio. Eugene, being so serious, would never imagine Brian and I are having an affair. The thrill of sneaking around is just irresistible. Can I come over to stay again? Come over tomorrow. The conversation between the two echoed into the living room through the open doors. The room fell silent at the shocking conversation, and all the relatives turned their attention to Brian and Jessica. You two, taking advantage of Eugene being overseas to have an affair? This is... Brian stammered, trying to come up with an excuse. You know, it's dangerous for a woman to live alone with my brother away. I was just checking on her from time to time because I was worried. My brother even asked me to look after Jessica. It's true. We're just good friends. Their flimsy excuses made me burst out laughing. Did they really think anyone would believe that? Jessica, you clearly said it was an affair. Oh, come on, it was just a joke. Hope, do you have any proof of us having an affair? Jessica smirked, and I felt a surge of anger. Just their conversation wasn't enough. I needed irrefutable proof. So, I showed Jessica the image on my phone. It was the receipt for the brand bag Brian bought with my card. Jessica, Brian gave you a branded gift, didn't he? You've received more than just this, right? I couldn't believe the frugal Brian would buy such expensive gifts for his brother's wife. Then Jessica smirked. Right. As friends, he gave me a birthday present. Have you never received a present from Brian, even though you're his wife? Wow. That's miserable. She laughed, shaking her shoulders. He's bought me lots of other things too. Brian will buy me anything if I ask. Right? Jessica looked up at Brian with a coquettish voice. Despite insisting they weren't having an affair, she seemed to be trying to assert dominance over me. However, Brian frowned and replied curtly. Huh? I plan to have everything returned later. What? Jessica was taken aback. I never said they were gifts. You said you wanted them, so I bought them. There's no way I'd use my hard-earned salary on someone else. Right. You even skimped on Alex's tuition fees. Jessica was dumbfounded as I nodded in agreement. What's that supposed to mean? You didn't say you'd pay back later? Jessica looked confused. That had to be a joke. No, I'm serious. Brian said with a straight face. I don't want to spend money on anyone but myself. Make sure to pay back half of everything, including the hotel stays we've shared. Giving Jessica anything for free doesn't benefit me at all. It must be around $30,000 in total, right? Jessica's face turned bright red. She lashed out in anger. Don't joke around. Why were you having an affair with me if that's how you feel? It's strange to hate spending money on a woman you like. It was to annoy my brother. Brian coldly retorted. It was fun secretly taking what belonged to my brother. You were somewhat my type, and when you came on to me, I thought I was lucky. Brian smirked. Anyway, make sure to pay back all the money spent. It's all noted in the household account book. You must be getting more than enough living expenses from my brother, right? Tears welled up in Jessica's eyes as she became rigid. That's terrible. I had an affair with Brian because I liked him. I never thought he was this kind of person. Screaming, Jessica grabbed her coat and bag. That's it, let's break up. I never want to see your face again. Fine, but make sure to pay back all the money. Like I'd pay back, idiot. A seriously boring husband is 100 times better than you. As Jessica stormed out, watched by the relatives, she bumped into someone in the hallway and fell. Grasping the offered hand, she gasped as she stood up. Eugene. I'm back. It's lively this year too. Eugene, with a breezy smile, slowly surveyed Brian and the relatives with a look of disgust. You were talking about me, right? Go on. Bro, why'd you come back? I wanted to spend the holidays in America. Worked hard to finish everything and came back. Brian paled as Eugene smiled stiffly at him. It seems Jessica has been quite a help to you, Brian. As Eugene shifted his gaze between Brian and Jessica, she suddenly clung to him, pleading in a sweet voice. It's not my fault. He pressured me into it, I was reluctant. I didn't betray Eugene because I wanted to. Please believe me. Who was it that always complained about a husband who only thinks about work, has the worst taste in clothes, and only gives cheap gifts? I don't know anything about that. You must have made it all up. Eugene. He's harassing me like this because he can't compete with you in work or studies. I respect and love Eugene. You're not going to say we should divorce, right? Tears in her eyes, Jessica clung to Eugene as Brian, and the relatives watched in disbelief. Thanks to Eugene's income, Jessica lived a luxurious life and wouldn't want to lose that by getting divorced. In her attempt to protect herself, Jessica hurriedly tried to make excuses. Eugene, smiling at Jessica, took out his phone. As soon as the holidays are over. I was planning, but maybe now is good too. As Eugene scrolled through his phone, pictures of Brian and Jessica looking cozy appeared on the screen. They were snuggled up together, entering a hotel. Waiting at a traffic light, gazing at each other dreamily. A scene of them kissing as they got out of a car. Such images kept coming one after another. Eugene, when did you? When I came back to America the other day, I had a detective agency follow her. I wanted them to tail my wife as soon as I left America. Eugene explained casually. Every time I come back, there are more brand bags and accessories in the closet, but no purchase history on the family card. Naturally. I suspected an affair. Eugene shrugged, looking at Brian with cold eyes. But I didn't expect the other man to be my own brother. The usually gentle Eugene's tone was filled with fierce anger, silencing the room. There's more. Want to hear the conversations we recorded through the hotel room door? No. That's enough. Jessica replied in a barely audible voice. So, you'll agree to the divorce? Yes. Jessica slumped, and Brian, surprisingly, remained composed. Poor brother. The first wife said it was a mismatch, and the second one cheated. And his daughter's college is lower ranked. Brian sneered at Eugene. Compared to that, I produced an heir, and my son landed a job at a top company. Plus, my marriage is harmonious. I've won in life, brother. Are you an idiot? I couldn't help but express my disdain. Brian blinked in surprise as I half laughed. Of course, you're getting a divorce. And your son's education and job are his achievements, not yours. Of course. The relatives nodded deeply. Divorce? Over a single affair? Don't make a fuss. I won't accept it. Brian was met with disbelief, and the in-laws spoke up. Brian, you don't need to come to the gatherings from next year. Why? Because we're distancing ourselves from you. What? Distance from the son who produced an heir? You're joking. Brian smirked, but his face fell at the serious expressions of his in-laws. And so, the holiday at the in-laws' house was greeted with a somber atmosphere. For Brian and Jessica, it must have been a hell of an evening. Listening to the holiday celebrations, Jessica signed the divorce papers Eugene had prepared and left the in-laws' house. After apologizing to the relatives for the commotion, I returned home. As I was leaving, my in-laws both apologized to me. After the holidays, I sent Brian the signed divorce papers. I took the apartment we had been living in, and Brian moved to a different apartment. After some resistance, Brian and Jessica reluctantly agreed to pay alimony, as demanded through a lawyer. Given Brian's high income, a substantial alimony wouldn't hurt him, or so I thought. Later, Eugene shared an unexpected story. Brian had been dabbling in investments without my knowledge. With almost no savings left, he had to borrow money to pay the alimony. Overconfident in his own intelligence and without proper study, he had invested heavily and suffered significant losses. To cover his losses, Brian ventured into other investments, leading to an even greater debt. It seems that was also a reason behind his stinginess with Alex's education funds. Moreover, after confiding in a close colleague about the reasons for his divorce, The news quickly spread to other colleagues and became known throughout the company. Feeling uncomfortable, Brian left his job and started working part-time to repay his debts. But he became distrustful of others and now spends his time secluded in his room, aside from work. Jessica, who had lived lavishly on Eugene's money, had no savings to pay the alimony to me and ended up pleading with her parents. Furious, her parents paid the alimony on her behalf and got her a job in a company owned by an acquaintance. Now, she is closely monitored in her personal life by the acquaintance and is made to work hard from morning till night. After the divorce, I live freely in a spacious apartment. With no one to nag about being perfect at housekeeping, I took the full-time employee conversion exam and started working as a full-time employee. I no longer have to endure snide remarks and can spend my money freely. It's a very refreshing feeling. In forward spirits, I plan to watch over Alex and spend the rest of my life meaningfully. Every couple has their ups and downs over the years, filled with various dramas. But in our case, we managed to spend 40 years without any major issues. At least, that was what I thought. I never expected to face a shocking turn of events. Suddenly, my husband George demanded a divorce. When he brought it up, George was holding a large bouquet of flowers. It was his 65th birthday, and he had just retired from his job. The bouquet, a retirement gift from his colleagues, was luxurious, with serene colors of orange, pale yellow, light blue, and white. Looking at it, I couldn't help but think, wow, that looks very expensive. Maybe it's worth a few $100s? As I was staring blankly at the bouquet, George smiled warmly and gave it to me. Jane, thanks for everything. I thought it was embarrassing. Come to think of it, George had never given me flowers before. He was the kind of person who thought that flowers were a waste of money because you couldn't eat them. And that celebrations always meant eating something more expensive than usual. When I first asked what he wanted for his birthday, he said, all-you-can-eat buffet. Moreover, he wasn't the type to give gifts to make someone happy. He had never even given me a birthday present, let alone flowers. So, it was quite surprising and delightful to see him happily giving me the flowers on his retirement day. Even though I knew he didn't buy them for me and he probably thought he didn't want flowers, it still made me happy. Stop it. George, you've worked hard too. Now, take it easy and do whatever you like. As I was nervously accepting the flowers, George said with a serious face. Thank you for doing household chores until now. I don't need you anymore, so let's get divorced. My name is Jane. My husband, George, and I were classmates in high school, and we started dating in our sophomore year. After breaking up and getting back together multiple times, we married on my 25th birthday. Our relationship was more like close friends of the opposite sex. We married because we enjoyed each other's company and felt comfortable together. We had 2 children. As my parents and in-laws eagerly took care of their grandkids, parenting was not too burdensome. We enjoyed our lives, sometimes together and sometimes with separate groups of friends. That was why we were less likely to experience the typical marriage problems that other couples faced. There was only one incident when George had an affair in his 40s, but by the time I found out, he had already split up with the woman. There was a time when I found several photos in his briefcase, showing George and the woman cozying up together. Apparently taken on a business trip. I discovered them 6 months after that business trip, and even though we were a couple who felt more like friends, it was still a shock to me. When I confronted George, he readily admitted to the affair, saying it lasted for about 2 months after the business trip. But that it was already over. He said nonchalantly, "You were incredibly busy with work at that time, Jane, often staying at a motel near your office." I felt lonely somehow and just ended up having an affair with a female subordinate who approached me. Although I was shocked to hear that and felt hurt, I didn't express myself clearly at that time. I realized I prefer you to that woman after all. She was so bothersome, always wanting jewelries or to watch romantic movies. I really came to realize that I married the right person. George's casual attitude and comments like that made me forgive him. Therefore, I didn't take any particular action. I also reflected on possibly neglecting George due to the pressures from work and decided to quit my job. As far as I knew, that was the only issue we ever had. However, it seemed George felt differently. According to him, he had felt uneasy about me since our honeymoon. I wanted a food-focused honeymoon, but you went ahead and booked the one with the sightseeing tour package. All that sightseeing we did just made me hungry, and the meals were nothing special. That was when I thought you really didn't consider me at all. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. For the past 40 years, that was what he'd been thinking. I did choose a sightseeing-focused honeymoon, but he was the one getting all excited about the tours. Also, he was the one who signed up for the night tours and left me behind in the hotel room. While I was struggling with jet lag, he went on and had fun alone. About that jet lag, if you were really looking forward to the honeymoon, you could have slept on the plane or found a way to deal with it. Jet lag is all in the mind, you know. I thought that was ridiculous. George had always been self-centered, but up until then, I didn't realize it was that bad. Seeing me speechless, George said, "Well, I suppose it would be hard for you if I told you to leave now, so I'll give you a month. Make sure to take all your stuff and be out by then," and then he just went into his study. To celebrate his retirement, I had bought an expensive wine, beef fillet and a cake from a renowned pâtissier. Setting it all up on the dining table for him. Tears started to well up as I saw it. The next day, when George was about to go out, I stopped him and asked why he was considering divorce and why he chose his retirement day to tell me that. He coldly replied, "While I was working, I needed your support with all the housework. But now that I'm retired, I don't need you anymore. I can just hire a housekeeper to replace you." After that, George barely interacted with me, didn't eat the meals I prepared, nor left any laundry. When I asked him about his meals and laundry, he said he was dining out and using laundromats. So, I've been looking into how to manage on my own. A man can live by himself just fine these days. So, to George, I was nothing more than a housekeeper while he was working. At that point, there was nothing I could do. So I decided to talk to our children first. We had a 39-year-old son and a 37-year-old daughter. Both were married and lived nearby, so I called and asked them to meet me at a cafe in our neighborhood. When I saw them, I said I was planning to divorce their father. My son immediately responded, "I figured as much." "Well, I have no problem with that, but when did you find out?" "What? When? What was he talking about?" Seeing my confused look, my son looked surprised too. "What? You didn't know? Dad's been cheating on you with a younger woman." According to our son, he saw George and a young woman walking into a hotel while he was walking through a busy downtown area for work. When he called out in surprise, George was initially flustered but then claimed, "It's just for fun, and your mother knows about it. Remember when Dad cheated with one of his coworkers when I was 20? Mom, you were so calm about it. So I thought maybe it was the same this time." I couldn't believe George was cheating again. And to tell such a lie to his own son. I was stunned, but my daughter suggested hiring a private detective to catch George cheating. I thought to myself that there was no time to be shocked. I promised myself that I would get everything investigated thoroughly. After a week of investigation, it turned out George's girlfriend was a receptionist at the company he worked for until he retired. And he was giving her a monthly allowance. Listening to a recorded conversation between them at a cafe, it was revealed he was giving her about $1,000 a month. And that she was asking for more. In response, George said, "We'll get married once my wife and I are legally divorced. Then I'll be able to give you plenty of pocket money." Wow. That was why he wanted to get rid of me all of a sudden. My children suggested confronting the woman. But I wanted to shock George and his girlfriend more effectively. Desperately, I looked up on the internet to find the method that would inflict the most damage on them, and even consulted with the lawyer I knew. A few days later, I called George to the living room. "I'll agree to the divorce, but we need to settle the division of assets first." Upon hearing that, George eagerly responded as if he had been waiting for that moment. "Half of what's in each of our bank accounts should do it." Fine by me. Now, let's talk about compensation for emotional distress caused by you. I'd like to claim $50,000. What? Divorce at our age isn't uncommon, so why should I have to pay you anything? With a sneer, George nonchalantly dismissed what I said, so I showed him several photos of him caught with his girlfriend. "Do you understand now why I've been emotionally distressed?" At that, George visibly startled. "I also found out you've been giving her a monthly allowance of $1,000. You're planning a trip to celebrate 3 years of dating, aren't you? So you've been giving her $1,000 a month for 3 years. That money rightfully belongs to our marital assets. So I'll be including that in the division. There was another thing. George had been receiving his credit card statements by mail, leaving them unopened and scattered around in the house. I gathered and opened them. The discovered bills alone, including the stays at hotels in New York and purchases from popular designer brands for women, amounted to over $20,000. Which was unquestionably suspicious. That would have to be included in the calculation as well. Oh, and I found a lease agreement dated 3 years back for the apartment you rented. The investigations by the private detective I hired revealed that your girlfriend is the actual resident, but since it's in your name, I can include that rent in our shared assets. George turned pale as I laid out everything at once. I wasn't surprised at his reaction. All of this amounted to nearly $100,000. Later, it was revealed that George had about $50,000 in his bank account at that time. He thought he would only need to pay me $25,000. But the actual calculations based on around $150,000 in savings meant he had to pay me about $75,000. How much do you have in your bank account? Half of that is mine. In a desperate outburst from George, I showed him my bank statement. The balance was about $70,000. So, his share would be $35,000, meaning he'd need to pay me a net amount of $40,000. When I mentioned that the land and house were also subject to the division of assets, he protested, "This house and land are in my name. They're not communal property." Bad luck for him. Law dictates that land and houses are considered communal property regardless of whose name they're in. And let me add that I've paid for all the home repair expenses out of my own pocket. The house was second-hand. And we've had multiple repairs over the years, amounting to about $50,000, so you'll need to reimburse me half of that. Even if we sold the house and land, and split the money between us, that wouldn't result in a deficit for George, but he was extremely upset, having expected to receive the full amount. However, I couldn't help but laugh as I handed him the business card of my lawyer, saying, "Oh, well, it is what it is. Here's the number for my lawyer." I saw a faint smile on his face. Pretending not to notice, I said to him, "You know that we need to separate at least for 12 months before we can apply for a divorce. I've already found a place to live, so I'm going to start packing my stuff if you'll excuse me." Then I went out to buy some moving boxes from the shop nearby. Returning home half an hour later, I found George lounging on the sofa. He seemed to think that everything was settled during our previous discussion. That was when I dropped the final bombshell. About your severance pay. Upon my bringing that up, George wore a smug, triumphant expression. "Too bad for you. The severance pay won't be deposited for another 3 or 4 months. Since we're separating, it's not communal property." Just as I expected him to say. Feigning surprise, I asked, "Really? That's terrible. How much are you getting?" "About $120,000. "Impressive, isn't it?" he boasted. "Well, that's pretty average for a small to medium-sized enterprise. So I'm entitled to $60,000 then." "What? Didn't I just say it'll be deposited after you move out of this house?" "Sorry, but severance pay is subject to division even if we're separated, as it will be paid for your retirement. And you retired before you told me you wanted a divorce. So the severance pay will still have to be divided. Unless we sell this house and land. Your assets will be in the negative. But even if we do sell, I doubt half the money you get from it will satisfy your girlfriend forever." Upon hearing all that, George seemed to freeze in thought, his eyes wide open, mouth agape. How pitiful he looked. When we got our house appraised, the old house and the land were valued at about $300,000. Selling them would allow us both to receive about $150,000 each. However, George, reluctant because his girlfriend insisted on not selling, ended up having to pay me $150,000. With the compensation of $50,000, George was burdened with a debt of $200,000. Why would his girlfriend, still in her 30s, have a crush on an older man like George and cling to that house? It was probably because, despite how old it was, a single-family house in a city with convenient transportation was attractive enough for her. After I moved out of the house, his girlfriend and her parents quickly moved their belongings into it. As a result, what George envisioned as a comfortable retirement with his pension, a happy marriage with a young girlfriend, turned into financially supporting her and her parents with just his pension, on top of repaying debts. He inevitably had to get a job. But at over 65, his annual income would likely be around $30,000. Additionally, since I sued his girlfriend for pain and suffering for breaking up my marriage, their relationship has turned quite hostile. It's probably only a matter of time before they end up selling the house. Oh, and about the rental apartment George signed the lease for his girlfriend to live in. It turned out to be a breach of contract since someone other than him was residing there the whole time. After I contacted the real estate agent, his breach was exposed, and he had to pay a penalty fee. How unfortunate it was for him. As for me, I rented an apartment near my daughter's family's home and work part-time 3 days a week at a supermarket that hired me despite my old age. My granddaughter, who has just entered middle school, is in the midst of her rebellious phase. But she seems to feel sorry for her divorced grandmother and often comes over to visit. Though I no longer have a husband, I'm living a happier life, having more time with my granddaughter. I don't care about your errands. My errands are the most important in the world. My daughter's birthday is the top priority. If you don't bring the celebration right now, I'll ruin the funeral. The ear-piercing shout of my mother-in-law. I regretted answering the call from my mother-in-law at the funeral service, trembling with anger. My name is Claire. I'm a housewife in my mid-40s with a high school daughter. Having a high school daughter means dealing with a girl who is fussy about makeup and fashion. I have this image that she would say, I can't wear clothes bought by my mother. But my daughter, Lily, is different. Lily gets along well with me and happily wears the clothes I buy for her. She's considerate and kind. However, Lily is not an ordinary girl. She can't lead a life of simply putting on makeup, dressing up fashionably, falling in love, and fully enjoying her school days. That kind of life is not possible for her. It's tough. Are you okay? Do you have a fever? Oh, it's gone down a bit. Do you want to eat something? I'm not hungry, I don't want anything. Don't say that, you won't have the energy if you don't eat. I'll prepare chicken soup. Okay. While caring for Lily, who was bedridden with a fever, I went about my household chores. Lily is frail. Though there's a diagnosed condition, explaining it now wouldn't make much sense. About a week after Lily was born, the blood from her umbilical cord wouldn't stop. We thought it was strange and went to the hospital, where a certain illness was discovered. Since then, despite treatments, there has been no remission, and we've been living with the illness. Regular hospital visits are a must, and the side effects of the medication often make her condition worse. During severe episodes, she even has to be hospitalized. Since entering high school, the number of days she has been able to attend can be counted on one hand. Realistically, she might not be able to graduate at this rate. But on her good days, Lily tries to go to school. She cares about her hairstyle like a normal high school girl, which is endearing. She doesn't wear makeup because it's against the school rules, a good and serious girl. Despite struggling with her illness, she lives her life with optimism, which is her best trait. Lily is my pride and joy. My husband, Michael, also adores Lily. If she even shows signs of getting sick, he'll say, I'll take off work and take care of her. Of course, I have to practically kick him out to go to work. He needs to earn a good income, or our family would fall into financial ruin. When I assure him that I'm taking good care of Lily, he reluctantly goes to work. That's the routine of our family. I worry about Lily, but despite that, our family and marriage are strong and happy. It was a peaceful and happy time. However, there's one person who isn't happy with our situation. Lily's got a fever again, huh? What a shame, wonder who she takes after. What brings you here today? What, can't a parent visit her son's house? You're such a cold daughter-in-law. My granddaughter is weak, and my daughter-in-law is a demon. My old age is just unlucky. Yes, the one dissatisfied with our family is my mother-in-law. She lives just 3 bus stops away and frequently visits our home to deliver her usual dose of sarcasm. Since the beginning of our marriage, my mother-in-law has loved picking on me. Now her attitude towards Lily is terrible too. Doesn't she find her granddaughter adorable? Michael never got sick this often. Claire, could it be something from your family line? I've told you many times, Lily's condition isn't hereditary, it's sporadic. No way, it's definitely something to do with your bloodline. This is why I was against Michael marrying you in the first place. My mother-in-law seems determined to disparage my family line, her snide remarks never ceasing. Realizing that engaging with her is a waste of time, I've gradually gotten used to dealing with her. Sighing, I took the chicken soup I prepared and headed to Lily's room. Wait. We're not done talking yet. I could hear my mother-in-law's shouting from behind, but I chose to ignore it. Once inside Lily's room, her voice became faint. Is Grandma here again? Yes. The usual daughter-in-law bullying. Grandma can't be helped. Lily gives a wry smile. But I'm sure Lily understands. With such a loud voice, there's no way Lily can't hear her grandmother. Yet, Lily never speaks ill of her grandmother. Instead, she looks apologetic and says, I'm sorry, Mom. It's my fault. Lily, it's not your fault at all. Even though she's done nothing wrong. Lily apologizes to me. Wanting her to never feel that way, my husband and I always try to greet Lily with smiles. We don't want her to dwell on the negatives, so we create a cheerful atmosphere. But my mother-in-law shatters that atmosphere in an instant. Hugging Lily tightly, I bit my lip. Her frail body. Lily's frame is nothing like a healthy high school girl's. Yet, feeling Lily's warmth, I realized it was time to firmly keep my mother-in-law away. The days spent nursing frail Lily. When she goes to school, I worry all day long. I took back the keys from my mother-in-law who would barge in during our absence. Days filled with endless arguments with my shouting mother-in-law. My husband working hard for his beloved family. Lily's laughter. Despite everything, those were peaceful days. I thought they would last forever. Why did I think that? There's no such thing as forever. Where there's a beginning, there's also an end. On a rainy summer day, Lily's condition worsened. The fever that wouldn't go down. The doctor's face clouding over with the test results. Me, holding a trembling Lily, filled with anxiety. And then Lily was hospitalized. Summer break came, and even as summer ended, Lily couldn't be discharged and the treatment continued. Those were incredibly difficult and painful days. Lily seemed to be suffering greatly. Yet, I believed she would get better, that she would definitely recover. Above all, Lily herself believed that. But Lily passed away. Dad, Mom, I love you so much. Leaving those words behind, she embarked on a journey far away. I looked up at the terrible sky as the autumn rain poured down relentlessly. The rain from my eyes wouldn't stop. It rained continuously on the day of the funeral, too. It was as if, being too busy to cry myself, the sky was crying on my behalf. The tears I shed on the day Lily passed away have now ceased. I was that busy. My husband also took time off work and was bustling about. I was swamped with contacting relatives and dealing with the school. It was necessary to stay busy. I couldn't have endured it otherwise. The sense of loss from Lily's departure was immense. Many people came to the funeral in the rain. Despite her limited school attendance, many of Lily's friends came to pay their respects. And every one of them cried. Some children cried out, asking why this had to happen. Others broke down in tears, saying they would always love her. Seeing this, I felt a perverse sense of happiness. Everyone loved Lily. I was overjoyed to know how much she was cherished. Many people spoke to me. And everyone praised Lily. My parents hugged me while crying. That's when I completely broke down. It was at that moment. My cell phone, tucked into the pocket of my suits, vibrated. Having the phone with me to handle any calls for directions to the venue, I hastily stepped outside to check the screen. It was my mother-in-law displayed on the screen. My father-in-law had already passed away, and of course, I had informed my mother-in-law. But she hadn't come to the hospital when Lily was in her final moments, saying she was too far away to make it. She had also said she had important matters and couldn't make it to the funeral today. That was supposed to be the case, but perhaps she was going to come after all? Maybe, despite everything, she wanted to say goodbye to her granddaughter. So I answered the call, but I immediately regretted it. "What are you doing, Claire?" she yelled. I'm at Lily's funeral." "What? What nonsense are you talking about? Get over to my house right now. To your house? That's impossible. What are you saying? What am I saying? I'm the one who should be asking that. Didn't I tell you I have important matters today? Hurry back and help me out. Important matters? There's nothing more important to me than Lily's funeral. I don't care about your errands. My errands are the most important in the world. What is this person talking about? First of all, I believe it's a huge problem that, for a grandmother, her granddaughter's funeral is not the most important event in the world. From the start, my mother-in-law was adamant about not attending the funeral, no matter how much my husband pleaded. Why should I have to help her with her matters? If it's more important than your granddaughter's funeral, why don't you handle it yourself? It's only natural for you as my daughter-in-law to help out. That makes no sense. I'm celebrating my beloved daughter's birthday. There's nothing more important in this world. Excuse me? It took me an incredibly long time to respond. Wait, what did you just say? My mother-in-law's daughter, that would mean my husband's sister, right? My sister-in-law, Monica. I remember she lives in some incredibly remote part of the world, where communication is only possible via satellite phone. And even that rarely connects. That's why, even for today's funeral, though I sent an email, I had no idea when she would read it. What about my sister-in-law's birthday? Wait, what do you mean by my sister-in-law's birthday? She's coming back home after ages. And just in time for her birthday, no less. We have to celebrate it big time, it's a must, right? I wasn't aware of such a rule. So, I need you to come over right away to help clean the house and prepare a feast. But I'm in the middle of a funeral. I don't care about that. My daughter comes before my granddaughter. Oh, and make sure to bring a gift, nothing less than $500. Hurry up. Or I'll ruin the funeral. Click. I hung up without waiting for a response. I couldn't stand listening to her any longer. If I had to hear more of her ranting, I felt like I might grab a sword and storm over there. What a selfish mother-in-law. Daughter before granddaughter? I'm not saying she has to choose, but to say her daughter matters more overwhelmingly is outrageous. More important than a funeral, ridiculous. I told my husband everything, and we decided to ignore her. He tried to contact my sister-in-law, who was apparently still on a plane and couldn't be reached. Trying to regain my composure, I returned to bidding farewell to Lily with tears. The day after the funeral, my sister-in-law visited our home. Apparently, she flew back after reading the email from my husband. She thought it would be faster to return home than to communicate en route, but the journey from where she lived to our home took dozens of hours. She didn't make it in time for the funeral. My sister-in-law apologized. She shared various stories with me. Stories about Lily and her aunt that I was hearing for the first time since they rarely met. Listening to her, I remembered Lily's childhood and cried again. My mother-in-law never showed up. My sister-in-law deeply apologized for that, too. Leave my mother to me, she said before leaving, but what did that mean? A few days later, I was still in Lily's room, unable to grasp the reality of her absence. Gently caressing her study desk. The room, untouched since her passing, was filled with too many memories of Lily. Just as I was about to cry again, it happened. Startled by the unexpected ring of the doorbell, I hastily wiped away my tears and was shocked when I looked at the monitor. There was my mother-in-law appearing on the screen. The mother-in-law who had made frivolous remarks on the day of the funeral, infuriating both my husband and me. The mother-in-law who, despite my resolve not to let her in, hadn't shown up for several days. What does she want now? I had no intention of opening the door, so I responded through the intercom. What do you need? Claire. Help me, please. I was puzzled by her sudden plea for help. If this continues, I might end up going to where my granddaughter is. Please, help me. She began spouting such outrageous things. With no idea what was happening, I reluctantly opened the front door, only for my mother-in-law to collapse inwards. What happened? I asked in shock. Help me. Monica. Monica, ah. Confused and tilting my head, I suddenly noticed a figure entering my field of vision. So you were here, Mom. The figure was my sister-in-law. She was smiling, but there was an unspoken pressure about her. Eek, she's here. Wah, what? What? Seeing my sister-in-law's face, my mother-in-law screamed in terror, turning me into a complete question mark. What on earth is going on? Just because I've appeared, don't say such rude things. Look, Mom, it's your beloved daughter, isn't it? My beloved? Not at all. What's going on here? Just days ago, she prioritized her daughter over her granddaughter, choosing a birthday over a funeral. What changed in these few days? While I stood dumbfounded, my sister-in-law handed something to my mother-in-law. Don't worry, the next one will be much easier. Here, just put this on your head and live with it. My sister-in-law placed it on my mother-in-law's head as she said those words. My mother-in-law shook it off and fled behind me for refuge. I won't wear such a thing. Why not? Because if I wear that on my head, people will think I'm a weirdo. Wondering what it was, I looked at the object on the floor. It was a mask. Not the kind of character mask you'd see at a festival stall, but something else. Like something an ethnic group from the depths of Africa might wear during a mysterious ceremony. The kind a shaman might like. And why does my sister-in-law have such a thing? Why is she trying to put it on my mother-in-law's head? This mask is used for divination where I live. My sister-in-law explained, answering my unspoken question. It has a unique look, doesn't it? Right? Aren't the bulging eyes and thick lips just the cutest? Whether it's cute is a matter of personal taste, so no comment there. But, well, it's an interesting design, to be sure. So, you're going to put this mask on her head? Not on her face? If we put it on her face, she wouldn't be able to see anything. This mask doesn't have eye holes. If it did, we could just have her wear it on her face. And what happens when she wears it? Oh, you don't know? This mask has the power to ward off demons. As if I would know such a thing. A demon ward? Yes, exactly. This person is clearly possessed by a demon, don't you think? She said, pointing at my mother-in-law. Her own daughter is saying such things. Is this what she meant by leave it to me? That's why I think if she wears this for a few days, she'll definitely become a normal person again. I've been trying other methods these past few days. Other methods? I made her wear a garlic necklace and run around the neighborhood. That's not for demons, is it? Wait, are vampires considered demons? I didn't really understand, but maybe it didn't matter. But running? What's that about? Is that why my mother-in-law looked so worn out? That must have smelled, I remarked. Garlic doesn't smell much if you don't cut it, it's not too bad as is, she explained. But that's not really the issue here. Well, that's beside the point too. The real issue is that my mother-in-law spent days like that. Running around. I really wanted to see that scene. Do you want to see the photos? She offered. Oh, I do. Taking photos was such a great move by my sister-in-law. What are you two having fun about? Show some sympathy for me. My mother-in-law screamed, seeing us enjoying the photos. I had almost forgotten she was there. Why should we show sympathy for you, Mom? My sister-in-law retorted, looking up from her phone with a sharp glare. Why? Because I'm your mother. If you want your daughter to show sympathy, maybe you should try being someone who deserves it? Who else could be as good as me? Who calls themselves good after dismissing their granddaughter's funeral like it's nothing? My sister-in-law shouted, her mouth gaping open. I rushed back from abroad for my niece's funeral, only to find my mother relaxing at home. When I asked if the funeral was over, she said she hadn't attended. I worried you were ill, but then you showed me how healthy you were by doing push-ups, right? Push-ups. She didn't even come when invited to the funeral. I couldn't care less about my birthday. What are you talking about? Celebrating a daughter's birthday is a parent's duty. I've never heard of a grandmother who prioritizes her daughter's birthday over her granddaughter's funeral. Their shouting match left both my sister-in-law and mother-in-law gasping for breath. That's why I'm saying I need to purify that demon-possessed rotten nature of yours and straighten you out. My sister-in-law yelled, ending her tirade with tears rolling down her cheeks. Having a grandmother like you, Lily was the one who deserved pity. Her words choked me up. Ah, my sister-in-law loved Lily too. Even if they hadn't spent much time together, my sister-in-law undoubtedly loved Lily. Holding back tears that threatened to overflow, I fixed a stern gaze on my mother-in-law. She flinched momentarily under my stare. "Ah," I started to saying. "What is it? During Lily's lifetime, you never did anything for her." "I'm not talking about giving her things, you never even showed concern for her, did you?" "So what? How could I dote on such a frail child just because she's my granddaughter?" "But Lily admired you." "What?" Caught off guard by my unexpected response, my mother-in-law was at a loss for words. I asked her to wait and went back inside the house. From Lily's room, I brought it back to where my mother-in-law was standing at the entrance. I handed her an envelope. "What's this?" "It's a letter from Lily to you." "What?" My mother-in-law looked back and forth between me and the letter in surprise. The letter I held indeed began with "To Grandma," penned in Lily's handwriting. My mother-in-law cautiously opened it and began to read. As she did, her eyes widened and soon, tears began to overflow. "I didn't do anything for her. I wasn't kind or affectionate to her," she exclaimed, collapsing to the ground on her knees. Picking up the letter that had fallen from her hands, my sister-in-law read it too. "Sorry for not being a healthy granddaughter, I'll try to be better so please don't hate me, I love you, Grandma." Lily. Even to such a heartless grandmother. "Lily was a kind girl," I said. "Yes, she really was." My sister-in-law agreed, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't stop my tears either. Then my mother-in-law, face down on the ground, sobbed, "I'm sorry. I was a terrible grandmother, forgive me, Lily." The three of us continued to cry for what felt like an eternity. Afterward, when my husband came home and was taken aback by our continued tears, my sister-in-law briefly explained the situation and then took our mother-in-law home with her. Despite her shaky steps, my mother-in-law's hand firmly gripped Lily's letter. No amount of remorse or regret could make me forgive her cold behavior towards Lily during her life, let alone her actions on the day of the funeral. I intended to remain virtually estranged from her. My mother-in-law probably sensed how I felt. The overbearing and malicious mother-in-law was nowhere to be seen anymore. My sister-in-law returned overseas, and my husband kept his contact with our mother-in-law to a minimum. Soon after, living a lonely life, my mother-in-law developed dementia. Fortunately, we quickly found a facility for her, where she now resides. Of course, I don't visit, and my husband only goes when necessary. According to him, during a recent visit to the facility, our mother-in-law kept muttering, sorry, Lily." Hearing this didn't stir anything in my heart. Years may pass, but I can't and don't want to forgive her. Yet, I can't help but wonder. In front of me is a photo of Lily, smiling happily. If it were Lily, if it were her, the kind-hearted girl she was, she probably would have forgiven our mother-in-law. No, she might not have held any grudge to begin with, because she was such a kind girl. "I love you, Mom." I thought I heard a voice, and I gently wiped the corner of my eye.